Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm with myself, Michelle Desrochers and Amelia Pisano. We're broadcasting live here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 107.7 FM and 105.3 FM from beautiful New Orleans. This evening's segment is partially sponsored by Folgers Coffee. So thank you, Folgers. We love you muchly. In order to participate in tonight's show, you will have to do one of a few things. Of course, go over to the YouTube channel, UFO Paranormal, not United Public Radio, and get into the chat. Subscribe if you haven't. We will be able to interact with you, probably the easiest on YouTube. But if you go to any of the other formats, such as the station's Facebook pages and Twitch, you'll be able to definitely comment in there. We just will not be able to respond to you in chat. However, we will see everything, and so will our guest, which brings us to our guest. Richard Estep will be joining us tonight discussing his new book and, of course, whatever else he's been up to in the paranormal. And it's going to be a really great segment. So settle on in, hopefully with a cup of Folgers, and let's get the show started. Amelia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. Nobody listens.
Good. No one listens to me either. Don't feel bad. Well,
No,
you
no.
listen. Sadly,
I listen. Of course,
poor
I
woman.
listen.
She does listen.
I do.
Poor woman. I can't get on the page. I got on the group page, but not on Canada's Most Haunted. But
It's okay.
everything's
will
out
go and
there.
accept
It's all
that.
shared. So hopefully, let me just put us in comments. And hello, hi Nancy. I just text you back.
Okay, I'm going to go and approve this, and we're good. Okay, good enough.
Yes, tonight
Got it.
has been with us before.
Yes.
We had so much fun. We asked him to come back. Richard Estep is a paranormal investigator. I think you need to update your bio, Richard. It says 25 years. I'm pretty sure it's more than that since we had you on last year. And the author of, again, 25 plus books, a regular columnist for Haunted Magazine, and appears regularly on TV shows such as Haunted Hospitals, Haunted Case Files, Paranormal 911, and Paranormal Night Shift. So it should be interesting. We kind of lost Michelle here, so I don't know why I'm just here by myself. There she is. She's back. Hallelujah. Because you were gone.
Yeah, everything just went down. I'm like, yay, great, wonderful.
I don't like the screen when it's only me.
I know. I'm just
there.
like,
Hi, Jen.
hello.
Hi, Zach. Yes.
Oh, hey, everybody. Man, oh, man. Yeah, good freaking times on that. So, all right. Okay,
Whew.
well, anyway, see everything's up and running. See how long it stays that way. I think it's not going to be that kind of a night. Anyway, so I got the whole bio. And yeah, he's definitely a little behind on that because he does have a few more books. And he's going to be talking about one of his books tonight, which I'm pretty excited about and hoping we can get a good paranormal collection in there also. So whenever he's ready or he's in, and Joe will bring him on board.
Definitely.
Yes. So with that being said, how was your day?
Busy. And yours?
Oh, definitely the same. Definitely the same.
That was a stupid question. But yeah, it was a busy day with lots of paperwork and stuff. So he's not in yet.
No, that's okay. We'll wait.
That's okay.
We'll wait.
Yeah. How about you?
Vet appointment.
And went well?
It went well, yeah. It's for a little Pixie. Looks like she might have some teeth issues. Why she's getting a runny nose, and it's like, not again. We just did this a year ago.
Oh my god.
Chihuahuas, it's just nice and expensive. It just kicks you where it hurts.
It's important that you say that, because if you have a love of a breed, you really need to know what kind of things can go wrong, because you want to give them the best life possible. You don't want to take them in if you can't afford things like this happening, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's brutal.
Every breed has something.
Yeah, I know. It's just brutal. What is this? Is this supposed to take what? Okay, Richard, take me to a green room. It's not working. Joe, can you send me another link, please? We're on.
Is he on Chrome? Because remember, I did that last time. Well, I did it from the iPad.
I know. I'm just going to tell him, don't use Safari. That's what he's doing. I'm not okay. Please try again.
Okay, my mug's the size of my head. Sorry, everybody.
I'm just going to try this again. And
Oh, and Joe put it in the chat. I don't know how that's going to help. You got to send it to
yeah, I don't think so.
everybody in chat's going to join us.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, careful now.
Oh my God.
Well, I'm glad the visit went well. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
It did. You know, it's very hard for her because she sustained brain damage when she was having a seizure, and then she had everything going on with her, you know, heart failure. So anesthetic could be really bad for her. Okay, so Richard.
Hi, Wayne.
This is not a thing. That's bizarre. I don't know. I was asking if he wants to create a chat. So I don't understand. It should be able to come right in.
He should be able to just come in. He just has to put his name down and then just click join.
Click join. Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Oh, there he is.
Yay. Woo.
Hi. Oh.
Nope, they're gone. Close.
What happened, Joe? He's gone. Joe. Yo, Joe. We need him. I'm starting to feel the effects of spring with my sinuses.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you were here, then gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hopefully he'll try again. This is insane. It's like, is it okay? Back? Yes. Yep. Close.
Are you there?
Hello.
Yay!
Decided to work. How about that?
Oh my God! It's absolutely ridiculous because everybody easy format. Click, then you go in. Click says enter broadcast. You're in, and then you're in.
You just have to put your name and then click join.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I'd had that option, that would have been great, but that's not what I had. I showed you the screen I had.
Yeah, that's insane. That's insane. Well, I'm glad that you made it, of course, because we're just like about to resort to Skype. So, how are you?
I'm doing okay. It's been a month, you know.
Yes, I imagine it has, especially in your line of work.
But spring is here. It's sunny. I got a little too much sun today, so.
There's never anything such as too much sun. You're talking to a Southern Italian. There is no such thing.
He might beg to differ. He's a little
whiter than me.
Like,
a little whiter than me.
Authority that we have snow coming back to Colorado for a little bit next week. So
wow,
I swear, Colorado has the craziest freaking weather. I'll talk to Bobby and he's like, "Yeah, Blizzard Beach here." I'm like, "What? It's 18 degrees Celsius out here."
There's nowhere else you can live, I think, where you are blizzarded in the morning and then you are in shirt sleeves, t-shirts, and shorts shoveling your driveway that afternoon. But that's Colorado for you.
That's awesome, though.
It is a beautiful state, though.
It is. It's lovely. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to get something out of the way before we start getting into all the fun stuff, because I was really alarmed a while back when I read that you were having some issues, some copyright infringement issues with some of your books. I'd like to address it because a lot of authors and artists are going through this sort of nonsense. Can you maybe just talk about that a little bit? So, you have a couple million people listening. It'd be nice to get it out there and any resolution.
Sure. It was interesting, but I've now something like 26 books out. Whenever I release a new book, I like to see what other books are selling in the same Amazon category. It's kind of good to see what people that read my books are also reading, and I like reading those kind of books. So I go to take a look, and I see one about haunted hospitals that looks kind of cool. So I pay closer attention, and there's an option on Amazon. You can click and look inside, read the first few pages, get a preview, and I'm like, wow, this is very familiar. And it was familiar because I'd written it. And so what had happened was that scammers, digital thieves, pirates, call them what you will, had done very poor quality scans of my book, Haunted Healthcare. And they had slapped another cover on it, fake author name, and uploaded it and was selling it as if it was their own work. And it was called something really badly grammatically incorrect, like The Haunting of the Healthcare, you know, which I kind of like now I say it.
Now that you've heard it, you're
Yeah.
like, oh, damn, I should have
Sounds
used that one.
so bloody formal, doesn't it? So I was kind of angry about it, and I tried to get Amazon to take it down, and they make it all but impossible for you to prove that this is theft. And then I started to get notifications from other sharp-eyed friends and readers that said, hey, this kind of looks like the same thing. And we identified 5 different books, wow. Same scan, 5 different covers, 5 different author names, all that had been uploaded to Amazon a few weeks before, and were just siphoning away book sales.
Well, I can give you an author name. It happened to a friend of mine. That's why she left.
That's really, really sad. And Amazon was pretty useless. They told me they didn't have anyone that deals with this problem, which, as big as they are, is surprising to me. They wanted me to fill out forms in triplicate, which I did, and jumped through all kinds of hoops and so on and so forth. And no avail. Like, they just were not engaged. They were not responsive or interested. And the more I thought about it, I realized from a kind of cynical mercenary point of view, they didn't have any motivation to be. Because if a pirate sells a book, Amazon gets its cut. If I sell a book, Amazon gets its cut. As long as the book's selling, they don't care who it is that's selling the book. And so they weren't particularly motivated to do anything about it. And God love my readers and my friends, some of the most spiteful people, thankfully, who deluged the books with 1-star reviews and were very clear, pulled no punches. A lot of their reviews were rejected by Amazon because of profanity, which I thought was great. But people were pointing out that this was plagiarism and theft, pure and simple. Most of the books are down. There's still at least one, though, that is just sitting there sinking in the depths of the charts because nobody's buying it. And I found the only way to finally get those books taken down that worked was that I was advised by some very smart authors, the guys from Sterling and Stone Publishing House, in fact. Big shout out to them. They said the only thing Amazon cares about when it comes to this kind of thing is tell them that it's technically a bad product. If you can put in product complaints, they don't care that your work's being stolen, but if people are complaining that this is a deficient product, they will take it down. And that's exactly what worked in the end.
That's crazy. Somebody should be responsible for policing things like that. Like for my girlfriend, I felt bad for her because it was her only book, first and only. And she trusted them, and then she found it. And it was cheaper than hers was selling for.
Book
piracy is a thing. We know that music piracy, video piracy, it's a thing. And it kind of, it interests me that someone like Amazon, who says they value their customer experience, really weren't all of that interested. And I think that when somebody points it out to you, then you kind of have to take action. But they didn't.
But it's like you say, there's no reason for them to. They're getting their cut. I know a lot of people who've had issues with Amazon. Usually, though, it's with ebooks, not so much like somebody going to the trouble of scanning, a hard copy. It's just like, ugh.
Well, these were ebooks, Michelle.
Oh, they were ebooks.
Yeah.
Oh,
and I actually did some research, and I hate to say this, but you almost admire them as criminals because it's almost certainly being done overseas. And I say that because a lot of the phrasing in the sales copy on the Amazon pages, you could tell English was not this individual or people. It wasn't their first language. And if you think about it, if you take a writer that's not huge, I mean, like I'm no Tom Clancy or Jack Kenner,
Now you're getting there, Jack. No.
You're just behind Jack.
Shout out to you, Jack.
I know a lot of people that would like to be behind Jack. I'm wearing the gear. But I do, I work hard, and I think I sell moderately well, quite well. And so, if you pick, say, 10 mid-list authors like me, and if you do this 5 times to each author, that's 50 different books. If you're making just $10 a book a day, you're making a decent chunk of money for very little work. So I won't say it was the perfect crime, but there's no way to prosecute these people. There's no way that I can do anything legally or to even identify who they are. Amazon won't give up that information. So I suspect actually that there are other writers out there like me, I can almost guarantee it, in the same situation that don't even know their work has been plagiarized. And I'm going to now have to watch the charts for the rest of my career to see if this happens again, because there's that whole thing about if somebody robs your house, if somebody burgles your house, they'll wait a month for the insurance to pay out for you to replace everything, and then they'll hit you again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, unless you're in a pandemic, they'll wait 6 months.
No, you're not wrong.
It's terrible.
Yeah, I thought it would be a good idea just to use this platform because it does reach so many people to talk about what you're going through, because right now you're sort of a voice for yourself and others who are going through the same thing. And maybe now somebody will say, hey, you know what, we should go look for this. Or maybe they'll just go and, you know, what's the name of the book? Everybody just go and give it a bad product review. Just get it right off.
Yeah. What actually happened was that as word of this spread, and a lot of my friends, their friends, started sharing the story, it impacted my book sales positively. People were almost sympathy buying, or they looked at it and said, oh, that kind of looks like a good book, actually. Let me give it a try. So that was nice to see in the end, but that's, of course, not how you want to get there, you know? And so it highlighted again that there are good, decent people out there. And that was the lesson I really took away from it. People will always find a way to do good, the good people.
Absolutely. So now you have a new book, which you're going to be keeping an eye on. Why don't you tell us about that?
Sure. So my newest book is Serial Killers.
Hey.
The number one question I keep getting asked is that me on the cover? No, it's not. But it's called The Minds, Methods, and Mayhem of History's Most Notorious Murderers. And it really is a deep dive into 40 serial killers and spree killers. It takes a look at why they do what they do. Takes a look at some of the very worst examples of humanity that hides among us in plain sight. And it's my longest book ever. It's 150,000 words, which is 3 times longer than most books I write. It took me a year and a half to research, and to some pretty dark places too. I felt like I needed some mental floss after I was done with it.
Wow. Yeah. I bet. Well,
I'm going to order mine right now.
Amelia be right up your alley.
I'm going to order it.
So, do you want to touch on some of the cases inside?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain expectations. And firstly, there are 1,000 books on serial killers, 10,000, 100,000. So it's difficult to find anything new to say. But I found that, especially here in the US, we tend to be very American-centric about this particular subject. Like, everybody knows Jeffrey Dahmer. Everybody knows John Wayne Gacy, you know.
Yes.
But and of course, everybody knows Jack the Ripper as well. And so you have to kind of address some of those, I don't want to call them classics because that sounds like a good thing. But let's just say some of those better known, you know, cases, the obvious ones, the Ted Bundys, you kind of have to talk about. But you go around the world and you go to places like Russia, look at somebody like the Rostov Ripper, Andrei Chikatilo, or you go to Japan and look at the anime killer, people like that. And it turns out that this is a phenomenon that crosses cultural boundaries, and it spans many, many years also. So I was fascinated at comparing them. I mean, one thing that that struck me was there were several cases in which, at a relatively young age, some of these individuals had sustained serious head injuries. So, you know, to the point where they had brain trauma, and one wonders if that didn't sort of kick things into high gear.
Yeah.
Looking at the chat, hey Alex, I hope your wife likes this book. If you pick it up for her, just tell her I said hi.
Yeah, Alex, pick up the book.
Yeah, pick it up,
Alex. On your way to getting that burrito, pick up the book, Alex.
Yeah, man.
Hi, Linda.
But I felt like I really wanted to kind of go around the world and look at some different cases and some historical cases. I mean, Burke and Hare, the body snatchers. You know, if you're not familiar with them, those were the individuals, the resurrection men, that used to dig up bodies to sell to medical schools for anatomy training. And when there weren't enough bodies, the entrepreneurial Scotsmen used to kill them, used to make their own by suffocating. It's actually called burking, specifically suffocating somebody and selling the bodies on. So, you know, I wanted to look into the past a little bit, go around the world, look at some lesser known cases, as well as the ones you would expect to see in a book called Serial Killers.
No, for sure. Alex, there's probably 5 or 6, maybe more Facebook links. I'm not sure which page you're on. He's asking to please post the link. Since you're not in YouTube, we can't do that, but maybe, Richard, can you post it on your Facebook page that they can find a link to the book?
I sure can do that, Alex, at the end. Or you
There
can
we
go to Amazon and type in the words serial killers Estep, and that will come right up.
There you
Yeah,
go.
it does right there.
Wow,
And is
nice and
this the
easy.
only place you can get your book
No.
right now, Richard?
No,
Okay,
you
where
can do the
else?
same thing for any other bookstore.
Okay.
Visible Ink Press are the good people that are bringing this book out. It's available on Audible. It's in hardback, and it's a beautiful hardback.
It's it doesn't have availability here on hardback on Amazon. Not in Canada.
You know, I've heard that in Canada and the UK, these books are pretty much already sold out, and they won't get
Wow.
restocked. I talked to the publisher.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
excellent.
But you might have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, that's
I can't
okay.
find the end of the
Oh,
month.
there it is. Okay,
Yeah.
let's post
And
it
Alex
here.
mentions H.H. Holmes. Now, Holmes is in the book. What
Yes.
fascinated me about H.H. Holmes is we all hear about how he's one of the most prolific serial killers ever, that he had this murder castle that was rigged to torture. And a lot of it was absolute garbage. Holmes, I mean, not to downplay it too much, but H.H. Holmes killed maybe 10 or 11 people, top. Not hundreds, but this whole legend has grown up around him and the murder castle and the World's Fair, which kind of falls apart when you take a close look at it.
Really?
Yeah. Now, he's no less interesting for that. But what I found as I looked into H.H. Holmes was he was a guy that was immensely narcissistic, as many serial killers are, immensely selfish, but he didn't kill people because he enjoyed it. A lot of serial killers take this perverse pleasure in what they do. Holmes's thing was that he was a selfish man. He wanted money. He wanted notoriety. And he killed people that got in his way. He saw people as a businessman sees obstacles to making money. So he was removing obstacles and roadblocks rather than killing people because he enjoyed it, which is something that is not well known about H.H. Holmes.
That I'd have to read your side of it, because I'm actually friends with the great grandson.
Yeah, me too. Jeff Mudgett, right?
Jeff. And Jeff, has he read what you wrote? Because he might argue that.
And Jeff, I'll tell you what, if there's an authority on H.H. Holmes, it's Jeff.
Yeah.
So I would go so far enough to say that this is my reading on it based on what I've read and researched and studied extensively. But if I'm willing to sit down with one individual and be schooled on H.H. Holmes, that guy is Jeff Mudgett.
Well, I can tell you he schooled me the last 10 years, but I'm going to read your side of it. I'd like to see
theories on Jack the Ripper and Holmes and that whole connection too. And did you see Jeff's show, American Ripper?
Yes.
Yeah, Jeff and I are very good friends. We actually share the same birthday. We've been friends since 2012.
So I thought that was like a nail-biting show, and it was fascinating. But I did not buy ultimately that Holmes was Jack the Ripper. I thought it would have been amazing, like the link.
He's in the show a couple of times with a lot of information on the show itself, didn't he, Amelia? Did he touch on the case at all, or was it just?
He was very disappointed with the way it was produced because they didn't cover. He wanted to cover a lot of H.H. Holmes, which Jeff would tell you he killed a lot more people than 10 or 12 people, and that he sold the skeletons for profit. That's why he wasn't torturing them. He just killed them, and he would have the like acid baths and sell the bones to medical schools. And he was selling insurance policies and killing the people off and collecting them.
And if Jeff has evidence to that effect, I think that would be awesome. And this is the way that research should work.
Yeah.
In that you state your opinion based on your research and conclusions. And then above all else, you don't get married to that conclusion. When new evidence comes to light that you're unaware of, then you have to be willing to evaluate it and revise your opinion.
Always. That's why I'm curious to read what you've written about him. I'm very interested. I'm not so sold on he's Jack the Ripper as much as I was so intrigued by the way he went about in his methodology and killing, and the narcissism, his upbringing. That's what I was interested in Jeff's book, was reading about how he was raised in the family.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, Jeff's the guy who knows, and Holmes didn't have the kindest childhood. As again, we find with a lot of serial killers, right? Some of them come from these terrible, broken backgrounds. You find with a lot of men, though, male serial killers, they're mama's boys. A lot of them are overly pampered and overly protected. So it seems to be one or the other as they're growing up. They're either the golden child who can do no wrong, or they go through these incredibly hard and abusive childhoods.
Well, he was also raped by his priest as a child, so molested over and over.
Yeah, that would be enough to mess you up. But it's funny you say, the mama's boy. Do you think that somehow damaged them in some way were they too coddled and they were just rebelling against other females? Is that
I think that in many of those cases, they start to develop this mindset of, I really am all that, and I really should have everything I want, and other people are there for my gratification and for my amusement and for my pleasure, and I think a lot of them are capable of dehumanizing others. They don't see people as people. They don't see people as peers, as being on an equal with them. They see them as no different than any other consumable, disposable thing, like a bottle of beer. A bottle of beer exists for me to enjoy the beer, and then I throw it away, right? They see people in that way in many cases. They completely dehumanize them.
I can see that. That's, I don't know. I've never followed along too much with serial killers per se, because it's just like you're mentioning, you've got 40 of them. To me, and I mean, it's a big world, I mean, we've been around a long time. It's just, I never would have fathomed that there would be that many that were notorious enough, so to speak, that you could actually go in and just find the information. So
that's barely scratching the surface.
Wow.
Like,
we have a few in Canada.
Really?
These are extremely, I don't want to say extremely common. It's not like you're meeting one every day, but there is a good chance that you'll come into contact with one or two throughout a lifetime.
That's frightening.
It should be. It absolutely should be, shouldn't it? And I suspect that it's growing in number, not least because we as a society have glamorized them. I mean, you look at Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who I also covered in this book. The guy had groupies like you wouldn't believe. This ugly, saturnine-looking individual, nasty, nasty human being, and he had female fans that were, at his trial every day, trying to get a glimpse of him. How many serial killers in jail get letters and wedding proposals from women they've never met? And at the risk, I understand that might sound sexist, but we don't tend to see this with female serial killers and male fans. It seems to be uniquely the male serial killers that.
So why?
This charisma.
What would attract? I mean, I say that. Look at Manson. And
Manson had many proposals, but he never killed anyone. He never killed anyone.
Yeah.
Well, you can argue that, right? And that Manson never actually wielded.
He wasn't charged with it.
Yeah. And I've heard that argument before. Charles Manson wasn't a serial killer. He set things in motion that I hold him directly responsible for those.
Absolutely. I'm saying in the eyes of the law, he wasn't considered a serial killer. But Ted Bundy got many proposals.
He did.
Paul Bernardo in Canada gets tons of proposals.
Still. Yeah.
There's something with the psyche of that person on the other side.
Well, look, Alex says in the chat, it's the bad boy syndrome. And there may be some evidence of truth to that. Serial killers are also rule breakers, right? And they are ones that kind of ignore the norms of human society, and they take on the world on their own terms. And I think that's part of their appeal, which sounds great until you actually have to deal with the aftermath and the misery that they cause. So you log on to Netflix and you'll just see this vast array of serial killer documentaries. They are so fascinating to people. They're so immensely popular.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never really followed along, like I said, but I find some intriguing. Like when you're looking at the Son of Sam, for example, and all the satanic ties that allegedly, I mean, a lot of this stuff started surfacing, even like through, the trials, and a lot of it was just kept out. And I mean, there's some deep satanic roots in there. I mean, his neighbor Sam, I mean, aside from the fact that he was carrying on about the dog with the 3,000-year-old demon that was telling him to kill people, but he got in there much deeper. Someone tried to kill him in jail. The neighbor's two sons, who allegedly were in this cult, ended up within 2 years of him being, like David Berkowitz being arrested, ended up dying, like amazingly, let's just say suspiciously, and he started getting into, I mean, a lot of them turned to, Christianity and religion in jail, let's face it. But I mean, he's become a minister and he's trying to fight against demons now. And it's just full blown. And when I started digging into this, I'm like, it's peculiar, do you find a lot of those type of connections with other serial killers who have been into the occult and things like that?
I think that it interests me that there is a link between religion, not just the occult, and some serial killers. I mean, you have, again, we talk about the Night Stalker, Ramirez was heavily into Satanism and believed that Satan would protect him. He believed that he was invulnerable, which worked great until that mob in Los Angeles found out who he was. And then the LAPD needed to step in and stop him from being beaten to death. But then you look at the other side of things. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. Yes. This is a guy that was fairly high up in his church, very involved with his local church, and that's the other end of the scale. You have to wonder, though, do they genuinely hold these beliefs? Because you can't be a devout Christian and be a serial killer. It's obviously impossible.
Unless you've got like the God syndrome.
Well, is this just a mask that they wear? And I find that interesting because Rader was a family man. You look at guys like Ramirez. This was a guy that was obviously bad through and through. He didn't really pretend to be much of anything else. Dennis Rader was a family man who would go home to his, family, go home to his wife and kids after a day at church, having also tortured and murdered. How did they do that? How do they compartmentalize those two different lives?
Amelia, you've worked in that field in crime a little bit.
There's a lot of them. A lot of them think that they're saints and that they're do-gooders and they're going out there and they're murdering because these are sinners. Or sometimes they see the bad side of themselves inside of them. It all depends on who it is. It's a huge study. I admire you for putting that kind of time and energy into it, because that is something that I'm very fascinated by. But I do believe that some have attachments, demonic attachments. I think there's some proof to that. And then there's others where if you look at brain scans on them, you'll see the back of their brain, which will have absolutely no activity when it comes to remorse or empathy or sympathy for anything. And it's not something they can help. And then there's some that you just go, what the F? Like,
now, do you think, Amelia, that they were born that way? Because this is the great question, isn't it? Nature versus nurture. Are these people simply born bad with broken wiring, or does something make them that way? Or a melding of the two?
Because our people aren't born bad typically.
I don't think, no, there are some that are. I don't think that I know enough to be able to answer that question, to be honest with you. I think I'd be arrogant if I did. Obviously it could be both. It could also be an attachment that just amps up everything else as well. I mean, I've seen that, but I feel like it's the way we nurture a child, and these are not nurtured. So if they are born without certain connections in their brain, say, and you're not helping, it's going to just get worse, but I can't say, I mean, I don't know enough about it. You'll have some detectives that'll just say, oh, they're born that way and blah, blah, blah. But there's so many factors that contribute to how they end up where they end up.
And I wonder if it isn't a kind of perfect storm, or perhaps imperfect storm, but is there a genetic component that we will one day be able to screen for? That fascinates me. Will we be able to look for certain warning markers for psychopathy and things like that in future? But if you have a child that is susceptible in a certain way, that grows up in a certain environment, sustains certain emotional traumas, like if all of these things kind of fall into place, then that would explain why you get a serial killer. You know, I think that there are people out there, perhaps more than we realize, that have all of those ingredients, but don't ever take the step of killing someone.
No.
Have you ever been so angry, so enraged that you could kill someone, or at least you thought you could?
Yes.
I think most people have, but we don't do that, right? That's the line that you don't. Yeah.
Just vocalize.
I'm laughing because I came
in the
close.
car.
I'm laughing because I came close. Yeah.
But you know, we all still don't step over that line.
No.
Mhm.
So there are, I think these are individuals that will sometimes step over that line and find, hey, I not only got away with this, but I quite like it.
Mhm.
You know, so I think there are many more potential serial killers out there with the correct mix and things, but one or two things don't quite align, and they have enough self-control. So India in the chat's talking about bedwetting, head injuries, overbearing mothers. They are absolutely all common characteristics of serial killers. Yeah.
Yeah. Abuse.
Yeah. And, you know, I wondered if it was kind of a male thing. I mean, Nanny Doss, the giggling granny who managed to poison multiple husbands and her own grandkid. A lot of her behavior was traced to a train accident. A train she was on stopped too sharply, and she slammed her head very violently on part of the train carriage.
Head injury.
There is your head trauma again. So that crosses both genders, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and it lends a lot of evidence to a missing connection in the brain as well. They're working on that gene right now. I was watching something. I don't know if it was on National Geo. I don't know which one it was, but I was watching it and they were showing brain scans and they said they actually found something, but they have to do further studies in order to test for this, because it's like, but do we want to test for this? Because just because somebody carries that gene doesn't mean they're going to, as you said, we are all capable, but it doesn't mean we follow through.
Right.
And it becomes a huge issue.
We look at children who abuse animals, for
worms, doesn't it?
A lot of them do abuse animals. Yeah.
Yeah. It opens a whole ethical can of worms. If we can identify this, should we? You know,
exactly, because pedophiles, what people mistaken even pedophiles with child molesters. Pedophiles observe; they don't engage. Child molesters engage. Pedophiles may look at photographs, look at pornography, sell a child, which is, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying they don't engage in the act. Or a child molester can go from molesting a child to a murderer within a couple of victims, because it escalates with them. You see that in serial killers as well. I wonder if they have similar genes. Be interesting to see that.
Wes says as a prison guard, he thinks it's a bit of both, and I suspect that it's same from Alex, and I suspect it's probably correct. There is no one simple, clear-cut explanation as to what makes it.
No, there isn't.
Something that I did find also is that they have a lot of issue with authority. So those that had a military background, like Jeffrey Dahmer, did not do well in the service. They had repeated issues with discipline, and a number of them would be booted out or did not progress. So those that disdain for authority, that dislike for being told what to do, to conform, because the military is all about conforming.
That's interesting. David Berkowitz did, I think, 2 tours with honors. It's like it's like one extreme to the next.
You also have to look at who they hunt as well.
Yeah,
that
maybe
comes into the play as well. It's not just that it's military.
No, he's
Berkowitz
pyromaniac, just broken family, adopted, like just messed right up.
But for him to be with honors, he could be one of those serial killers that seek out credit and praise. So he would do well. Where, if you're in the military and you're not doing well, it's possible that you're arrogant, you're narcissistic,
you just really
you're not
like
going to
your
take
job.
orders.
Depending of being high functioning, isn't there? Some of them blend very well into regular society. Others are just the classic horror movie monster. I don't wash. I can't talk to people. I can't, speak to people. There are definitely 2 ends of that particular spectrum. And I think, I don't know if it's an official term, but the ones that are able to do that well are the kind of high functioning serial killers that, people are genuinely surprised when they turn out to have murdered a whole bunch of people. And then you look at, Jeffrey Dahmer, and nobody was surprised that this guy did what he did when he was caught.
They picked him out in high school.
Yeah.
They picked him out. And then you got Bundy, who is just so charismatic and so smart. Just the way he lured them in, with sympathy.
I think Bundy was his story. And I do like to differentiate between the two. The smart ones don't get caught, after all. So Bundy was cunning, and jumping out of the courtroom and going on the run, living rough, those kind of things. Bundy was very impulsive as well, and it's hard to be truly smart and impulsive at the same time. But yeah, definitely there's a degree of cunning with some of these individuals that know how to manipulate. And of course, with Bundy, there was the whole fake broken arm, can you help me load my car?
The leg.
Routine, which he kind of got down to a fine art.
It was an easy way of getting him in his trunk.
So what set him off initially? It sounded like he had a good career, he had family life.
But he did
what
not
made
have
him
a
snap?
childhood, according to what we know.
Okay.
Bundy had a single mom, was born at a time when being a single mom was very much, there's a real stigma to that, and did not have the easiest time of it as a boy.
No. Gacy, he offered them jobs. That's how he lured them in, and that's how he, I always say child molesters who kill will always put themselves in a position of work where they have huge access to their prey to make it easier. And he had a construction company, and he would hire young boys to work the summer, and there's disputes with how many people he killed as well.
Yeah,
it's only they can only base the 33 under the bodies that they found, but they're assuming that there could be a lot more than that because the time frame.
Well, he started dumping them into the river once he filled up the crawl space under his house. Going back to that workforce thing you talked about, Amelia, one of the most terrible things in the Gacy case was that he used some of his future victims to dig their own graves. He'd send them unbeknownst to the crawl space beneath his house with quicklime to cover up the smell of decomposing bodies to dig what would become their own graves. And I think he took a sadistic pleasure in that.
And it's a good example also of how he's the only one in the family. So this could possibly be something you're born with, because his two sisters are highly functioning adults in society and were totally shocked by their brother. That's where I wonder what else is at play with this. Yeah,
that's a good point. Gacy was very involved in local politics. There is and I apologize, I forget her name, but Gerald Ford's wife. There's a photograph of him with the First Lady. At one point, he was so involved in the civic scene. And the whole clown thing, I don't think that was him trying to do good deeds. He was openly quoted as saying, clowns can get away with murder.
And it was a way of him to remove himself from the situation, right? He's this good guy and this loved guy and children love me, and then he's this other person. So I feel that's the way he balanced his life every day and was able to live with what he did.
There was a big degree of repression with Gacy. Obviously all his victims were male. He sexually assaulted them all. One of the big triggers he had that would make Gacy fly into a rage, though, would be if you said or implied that he was a homosexual. He would be outraged. How dare you? I am not. And he would, in fact, in prison, he beat a guy pretty severely back when he was a cook in prison for saying that. So there was a great deal of sexual repression and denial going on with him, as there do appear to be with a number of serial killers.
I'm amazed he survived prison, to be honest.
Oh, who, Gacy? Well,
that nobody killed him off in the beginning.
Yeah, this was the first time though before he was in for the big long stretch, and he was the model inmate. He was involved in cooking and all that kind of stuff. Except when his guard came down, he lost it a couple of times. He did everything he could to try and put up this smoke screen.
Takes work to be normal.
Yeah, pillar of the community. And I often think that's it. That the things you and I take for granted, going to work, having friends, having a social life, to them, that's a job. That's a chore, right? That's a task. In the same way that for most normal people, going to your 9 to 5 might be a chore, and that's what you do in order to live. I think that the ordinary life smokescreen was, for a lot of these individuals, the equivalent of work. And it's hard work, right? You're tired when you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You having worked the paranormal, do you feel like any of these possibly had demonic attachments? Any of these serial killers?
I think the word demonic is grossly overused, especially on this side of the Atlantic.
Yeah. Malevolent?
Is it possible? I mean, I wouldn't discount it. But I also am a big fan of Occam's razor, which tells us that, generally speaking, the simplest explanation tends to be the most common one. I come down far more often on the side of this being a behavioral, psychiatric issue. Yeah, I think that it's very tempting to see it that way if your belief system includes it, but I don't like jumping to that conclusion. And we might actually be doing a disservice by giving them this get out of free card, because the devil made me do it has been a courtroom defense that was used. Hell, look at Amityville, you know. Ronald DeFeo used that, the devil made me do it, right? Son of Sam and all that kind of stuff.
He changed it a few times.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing is, people have been to that house, and, I mean, there was somebody on the show recently who'd been to that house and said, it was real. I had experiences there. I was just like, God, okay.
You've also got almost every owner since the Lutzes that says this is a peaceful house. Nothing ever happened here. And the most frightening thing that happens here is trespassing.
Yeah, that's a shame. It still goes on.
Sorry, there are cases that it doesn't affect the family that's living there, but maybe perhaps the next family. Not everybody is
I've worked houses like
that.
Families have moved out, and the next family comes in. It's like the walls can come down around you, and you wouldn't even acknowledge it.
I mean, one of the cases that I'm looking at now, I'm writing a book about, is the Sally House in Aitchison, Kansas.
Yes.
And again, you see a lot of these cases. I worked one in the UK, the Cage Witches Prison, which was, according to the owner, who fled the house in the middle of the night with her infant son, the most horrific haunting you can imagine. This poor woman, told me that she was targeted by this malevolent entity, this jailer. And I talked to the neighbors who share like an immediate wall with the house, and they said, no, nothing remotely strange here at all. Nor do the people that lived there before, nor do the people that live there now. I've always believed we have generally 3 types of haunting: haunted places, haunted people, haunted objects. And you get combinations of those 3 things. So while I never say a place isn't haunted, excuse me, I think it shows immense arrogance to do that, to dismiss somebody's experience.
Yeah, I agree.
I also do like to balance as much of the evidence as I can and say, in this case, this is what it seems like. I've just written a book about the Hotel Cecil.
How is that one?
About that kind of Venn diagram where true crime meets the paranormal. And everybody's got a theory on what happened to Elisa Lam. Ranging from she was playing the elevator game, to she was demonically influenced, to the spirits of the Cecil made her do it, to she had a psychiatric breakdown.
I'm on the last one.
I am 100% with you, because when you look at the evidence on autopsy, her medications were at subtherapeutic levels in her bloodstream, and she had shown a series of bizarre behaviors before she went into that hotel. So, but I think
and they really checked her bottles, and she wasn't taking them for days.
Correct.
So,
and
she was also experimenting with drugs.
She'd been thrown out of a TV recording, a TV taping. I say taping like they use tape in 20 years. But
it's okay. We got you. We understand you.
Yeah.
Yes.
But she was acting bizarre. So she showed all these signs that are pretty characteristic. But unfortunately for her and for her family and for her memory, it has been blown up to become this big demonic, or negative, malevolent haunting. I do think the Cecil is haunted, just because I've yet to find an old historic hotel that doesn't have at least 1 or 2 ghost stories.
Yeah, everybody's flocking there now, of course, to investigate it, right? So,
but I think we also have to be willing to say, take a step back and weigh the evidence.
Yeah, in her case, absolutely. I think people are too quick to judge. Look for the what they think is the obvious. I mean, I agree there are malevolent energies out there that will amp up pre-existing conditions of depression or anxiety, things like that. It could end up leading to things going wrong or psychokinesis, things like that.
Yeah.
So you don't like to discount it 100%. And let's face it, you can't really discount other people's experiences. I just think people behave differently in certain situations. I mean, you could take, 3, 4, 5 different people, put them in the same haunted home or put them in the same area. And, you're always going to have that person whose imagination is going to run wild with them.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you got to, like this house, it's haunted for sure. And it's easy to let your imagination run wild. You can have mice in the walls that sound like the house is coming down. And it's easy. The easiest thing to think is like, ooh, something's mad. But meanwhile, it's a freaking mouse.
We filter all of our perceptions through our own biases and belief systems. And I will never forget one of my first cases in the USA, and this would be 18, 17 years ago, was really, really sad. It was a young Hispanic couple that had bought their first home, and they were terrified because they believed the place was haunted, and was not just haunted, but they said by demons. And they told us stories that they had heard demonic growling, and that they had heard these, big, heavy footprints walking around the house at night. So they had paid a medium to come in, and there's the big first red flag. Any psychic that takes your money to help you, I have an issue with.
Absolutely.
And she was telling them these hair-raising tales about vortexes and portals and demonic entities. And I'll never forget this: a dead baby in the bathtub. And these poor people were spending the night sleeping in watches. And what I mean is that the husband would stay awake with the lights on while his wife grabbed a couple of hours sleep, and then she would watch while he slept. And they were exhausted, and it was tragic. So they let us in for the night. And, they had painted crosses over all the door frames and windows. And, the first thing I did, I went to their DVD shelf, and I saw The Exorcist, Exorcist 2, Exorcist 3, Rosemary's Baby, The Omen. I mean, there's a theme here, right? They are big fans of this religious type horror.
And they were validated by the medium.
Well, they've been their biases had just kind of set them up. But, we keep an open mind. And we found that what sounded like footsteps in this house, they were on the main flight path to Denver International Airport. And every time an aircraft would come in relatively low over the house, it would cause vibrations which sounded like footsteps. And so it was a noisy house. It was a relatively old house, and we were able to replicate a number of the things that they talked about, and said, look, guys, we're here to support you, but I really don't think you have too much to worry about. And we stayed with them, trying to talk them into what they ended up doing was fleeing the house. Their first home. They could not get past this belief that had been implanted in their head by a very poor excuse for a medium, and by their own Catholic beliefs.
Well, obviously not a good medium, or not an accurate either.
Well, there has to be tact also. I mean, even if the findings are accurate, you have to learn how to deal with people, what to say, what not to say, and how to say it. You can't just go in there like that.
One thing that really grinds my gears, and I won't name the show, but I did recently catch a paranormal show on TV, and the celebrity investigators on the show actually said to a couple, yeah, you might want to think about selling up and moving. And I'm like, what? In this, like right now, this is the advice you're given?
Let me tell you, there's one show on there that they constantly give that advice, and I'm not going to mention it either.
Yeah. And I think
it's constant. I would move. Well, that's good. I'm glad you can move. Not everybody can move. And some people they shouldn't have to move. It's just terrible.
Yeah. And I think paraethics, Dr. Kieran O'Keefe over in the UK is doing a great deal of writing and lecturing on this subject, but paraethics have to be a thing. And when I investigate a case, I always am suspicious whenever there is money changing hands. Come rent my place for 2 nights at $300 a night. It has activity you wouldn't believe. And I'm always really suspicious as well when there are ratings involved. When there is a TV show which is consistently getting results week after week after week, because 26 years now as a paranormal investigator, I do not get results case after case after case.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm not trying to sell a show. I'm not trying to produce ratings and keep a network.
You're lucky to get results. I think the most exciting part of the night is the coffee.
But don't you find it happens when you're not trying? Like, you get the best results almost expectedly. I mean, when we investigated Fox Hollow Farm in Indiana, which was a serial killer's residence, we were in the woods, and we had brought in someone who claimed they were a medium and told us, they said, if you were to dig here, I am convinced you would find bones. I'm like, well, I can't let that one go. These poor guys got no burial. Their bones are still out here, right, at Fox. So we dug, and we left a voice recorder running. No bones, thank goodness. But at the end of it, we replayed the audio back. And apart from the sounds of us digging, you hear a man's voice, definitely not one of ours, that said the words, "Get away from there." Now, it wasn't an EVP session. Right. We were trying to prove or disprove this person's claim and left recorders running.
Those are the best recordings, just to let them, or when you're having a conversation in the house of someone who's living there and everybody's butting in.
Yeah. The worst ones by far, the worst way to get EVPs by far is to sit there and do the traditional, is anybody here that wishes to communicate?
And they're looking at you like, I'm right here. In fact, they don't realize you're dead. They must look at you like you're an idiot.
Yeah, and I can't release a lot of my EVP session audios simply because did my camera die? Hang on one second.
There you go. You're back.
I can't release a lot of my audios because the conversations we have are deliberately what's the word? Some pretty off-color humor, And my theory on this is that if you're at a party and there are two different conversations going on, and the first conversation is somebody saying, "Tell me about yourself. When did you die? What year? Are you aware?" And then the other one, there is a guy talking about the time he drank 19 cans of beer and ended up skateboarding naked down a hotel staircase. I want into that second conversation.
Exactly.
I try to make it fun, as far from a typical EVP session as you can get. And I'm a big believer that we're almost drawing them in to comment or to stick their oar in. And a lot of really good EVPs aren't direct answers to questions where you leave an appropriate amount of space. It's somebody butting in with their 2 cents.
Exactly. I've done that for years as opposed to traditional recordings. I always drop recorders everywhere, or video cameras, whatever. Or I always set one up if I'm just conversing with the people who live there because they're comfortable around the people who live there.
Yeah.
So they're going to just get right in there. And I've had phenomenal things. People are like, where do you get such good recordings? Because I don't ask stupid stuff. Like, just,
how many times have they been asked the same question?
Oh, you guys are killing me.
It's true. What, when did you die? What year is it? What's your name? How many of us are here right now? How many fingers am I holding up?
See, and if I was on the other side and somebody said to me, how many of us are here? I'd be like, why, you can't count?
See, I'm not even getting out of bed for that question if I'm dead. I'm asking something interesting.
No, it's true. And I'm not trying to knock anybody. I'm really not. People have their own way of doing things. Some people have a whole lot of luck doing it that way. I, for one, am not one of those people. I have better luck just laying things around and going about my business while I'm there and seeing what comes up. And
I agree with you. And I think as long as you maintain respect, and I want to be clear about that, it's important that you have fun by all means, but you're treating the location and the spirits there with respect.
I agree. Always. You have to treat the spirits with respect, and you have to treat the people with respect. There's a lot of research that goes on out there, and they make the people feel as though, oh, you're lucky, we're here to help you. No, how about you should be lucky and feel privileged that they're letting you in to investigate, that they trust you enough. And there's too many people who betray that trust, and people are leery. They need the help, or they want answers, and they're leery about bringing anyone in just because somebody effed up so bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I teach new paramedics, one of the things I always teach them is never lie to a patient even when it's a small lie. If you're going to give them a needle and it's going to hurt, tell them it's going to hurt. Because if you lie to them and they're at the hospital in 10 minutes, you never see them again, the next time they need to speak to a medical professional, they don't trust them because they were once lied to by someone in that same field. And I think it's true with us here also, you know. Alex asks, have I ever used tools like Ouija board?
Having Richard, he reads his own question.
I know. Richard, you want to job on a show?
You know what? These folks are taking the time out their evening to listen to our ramblings.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
You're the best, Richard.
Always,
you really are.
Do that. We always do that.
You can actually see behind me. I don't know if you can, Alex, but
can.
right there. There is a spirit board up there, talking board, I should say. I own several. And yes, I do believe in using them. And I know, again, it's primarily a US thing. There are a lot of people that think the talking board is this big, dark, negative thing. I have one friend and colleague, I won't name him, but he won't even touch one. You know, and I don't see how attempting to communicate via one of these boards is any different than what you do in an EVP session or with a pendulum or one of 100 other techniques.
It's the same thing.
It's about intention to initiate communication. It doesn't matter if it's the board, if it's the ghost box, if it's a voice recorder, if it's a phone app. It doesn't matter. If you're initiating communication, it's about the intention. That's my personal view. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, on the other hand, I think anybody who can tell the difference, what they're communicating with, don't leave themselves open for, any trouble. Because I mean, kids, for example, I see it all the time. I mean, I work with this one family. The little girl's only 8 years old. The father worked a lot. He was just away a lot. He was buying her EMF detectors and voice recorders and, and then he was wondering, he's coming home and he goes, oh, the doors are opening and closing by themselves. I was like, what are you letting her do?
Let me if I may share a story about one of my kind of regrets in this field. This does not show me in a good light, so it's kind of a confession, but I was investigating the Black Monk House in England, 30 East Drive.
We had him on the show.
We had him on.
Did I tell the story about the two boys last time I was on the show? Do you recall?
No, I think you touched on it just briefly. So
the girl had let me investigate his house for a week, and it was a very hot summer, and there's no air conditioning in the house. So I'm upstairs in the bedroom that the daughter of the family had originally slept in, and I open the window just because I want some kind of breeze. And I see these two boys, like maybe 10 years old, on BMX bikes. I feel awful. And they're like, look, mister. And I'm like, hey, boys. And they say, is this the ghost house? And I said, yeah, it is. And they're like, oh, cool. And I should never have done this. Never do this. I said, boys, do you want to know a secret? And they're like, ooh, yeah, what? Tell us. And I said, I died in this house 50 years ago and I'm still here.
You definitely didn't share that one.
Because
you didn't, because I would have thrown that back at you.
Because I had younger knees back then, I went down at the knees in the window, so I went.
Oh my God.
Like I'm sinking through the floor.
And what'd they do?
Screams. I was ready for the police. I'm like, they're going to arrest me. This is awful.
Oh.
I mean, it was funny, but it was terrible.
It's hilarious.
I know, but it's a good
and it was just a joke.
Oh my God. You know what? Maybe they bully people, and that was just a great way of getting back at them.
I also think I kind of gave them a cool story about the haunted house. But here's the thing, right? It got me wondering, how many times have we heard, on talking boards that somebody has gotten a message saying, you're going to die, I'm going to. Is it the equivalent of that kind of prank? Do the dead have that sense of humor as well?
Let's hope so.
I say so.
I kind of think, if somebody came into my place that I was haunting and was acting disrespectfully, and they opened a board for me to talk to them on, I would probably put the fear of God into them. Things like, I'm a writer, I can use words.
It would be too much fun. If I was stuck behind, I think that's all I do.
Yeah.
It would just be too much fun. Yeah, especially when you have a list, if you pass before all these people.
But, I mean, your character in life will be your character in death, right? So if you're I think, so if you pass on, everybody can expect just some crazy stuff coming from you.
I like to think I've grown a little more sober and respectful, but it's probably not true.
Yeah.
But, you know, it also got me thinking about the way we communicate generally and interpret things. I think the movie The Amityville Horror is where this started.
Mhm.
But the whole get out thing that we, you know, you hear that so many times as direct voice and EVPs.
Yes.
And then somebody pointed this out to me, and I forget the gentleman's name, but it really changed the way I looked at it. He said, have you considered that maybe rather than being angry and belligerent, is this a warning? Is it possible that there could be something negative around and they're warning you to get out, that they're
That's
not telling
happened
you
to
to get
me.
out? Could they have your
Absolutely.
best interests at heart?
Mhm.
Sure, but it says saying get out. I've been told on a few occasions, run. What?
Yeah.
When? Right now?
Well, you know, you could say that to me, and quite honestly, it's good advice because I'm not getting my 10,000 steps in.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I did once get told, true story, to exercise.
Oh,
I got told to exercise on an EV. I'm like, no manners, but what a critic. You know,
Wow.
I got nothing. I got absolutely
was it Wes that did that? Are you sure?
No,
it wasn't
no,
Wes? Wes
Oh, he's here.
is so loyal to the gym. That's why.
Oh yeah, he's sitting in the background.
He's lurking. He's lurking is what it is. He's picked a quiet cell and he's lurking. No, but this was an American case, and that same session, we actually got called. I got called a redcoat, which I thought was fantastic.
Wow.
That's amazing validation that they picked up on your accent so
That's right.
quickly.
Bigoted, but historic. You know,
Right.
That would happen if you came to Canada as well, though.
Yeah,
I believe, well,
redcoats,
especially around the 1812 zone, right?
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
can
that's
very
true.
much, which
That's
is
true.
where I live, Richard. So you have a place to stay if you ever want to investigate.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Canada's on my bucket list, and I think that there are so many good people though in this field with good senses of humor, and I like to think the same's true with whoever we're communicating with. You know,
I think so.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
The problem is that when I first started, there was no. I hadn't even heard of a demonic haunting for the first 7 or 8 years of my career as an investigator because there was no TV and therefore no ratings. Like you read a couple of cases like the Amityville Horror, which I'm not a huge believer in that particular case. The Lutz's attorney, I believe, came forward and said that they helped cook that up over a bottle.
We've had one of the reporters on the show, and I don't know, she's talked to the priests, and he said it did happen to him.
Well, what's
He did
interesting
hear
though
that.
is could this be a thought form case where you tell that story over and over, and even though the original incidents didn't go down as described, they have a way of taking on a life of their own. Right? They have a way of taking on a life of their own. And I think that in the Amityville case, if there was activity at that house, again, I don't find it likely. I don't buy the devil made me do it defense that was initially used. But this story has been told over and over again. It's been made into movies, countless books. Hans Holzer wrote 3 books about it, for goodness sake. All of that stuff. Could this become a thought form, a tulpa?
Yeah.
Has it taken on a life of its own? Because that way you would have activity in and around the house.
Anything is possible if enough intention is put behind something.
Yeah, but it's been created by this media phenomenon. Wouldn't that be ironic?
The only thing I have with this, because like the Lorraine Warren walked through that home with the journalist that we had on, and there was activity. That's the only thing. It's like, okay, I don't know how to, I don't know, you know, like I would have to.
Laura's very logical too. She's not paranormal. She's
Exactly.
not all witchy woo woo. She's
No,
very,
she's not.
Lorraine Warren has been to how many haunted locations in her career?
I know.
That kind of leads me to another subject I'd love to talk about, and that is, you know how if you're not careful, you walk into a friend's house when you're a visitor and you track mud onto their carpet if you don't take your shoes off and protect yourself. How many times do we go to places like the Villisca Axe Murder House, the Fox Hollow Farm, pick something up without knowing it, and then take that to another location?
it happens all the time.
And you get activity at that location. It comes back to the whole are we dealing with a haunted person, place, or object? So
That's a great point.
yeah,
Yeah,
not
I'd like
that's
to
a
denying
really
think
good
that
that
point.
people would take precautions, though. You know,
I
Right.
know it's so hard. It's
Yeah,
so hard
I
because
mean-
it's them, right? Like it's so hard.
no, but anybody. I mean,
Mhm.
if you're seasoned, you know to take precautions and be careful.
Yeah.
You know, ground yourself, do whatever it is.
But,
It
you know, I
takes
didn't used to.
mindset,
I
purge
was
it.
significantly more arrogant as a younger man, and that's really saying something. But I used to not protect myself at all, and I used to laugh at people that did until, you know, pride goeth before the fall, right, as they say. Until I needed to call in a friend of mine who is a priest to cleanse my own house because we started having weird things happening. So
Yeah.
what you told me about Amityville made sense to me, but how do we know it was the house versus Lorraine and the places she's been, you know,
We
and the
don't.
objects she's got?
We really don't. That's a really good point. But the only thing in her favor, though, there's a lot in her favor, but she was there right after the murder. Like it wasn't just the
But
time
okay,
with
so
the
let's
Lutzes.
hypothetically say that
Yeah.
the attachment was with Ronald. Ronald's taken out of the house.
Mhm.
Things ceased to be. Maybe it was him all along.
Then do we have a very, very, very haunted prison cell somewhere?
Well, very possibly. Aren't they all? Wes,
That's a question for Wes.
fill
Yeah,
us in.
Wes, you need to
Quit holding
answer.
out.
Are you listening? Or are
Yeah,
you
you
making
say
your
it.
rounds?
No,
Mhm.
you hear about,
Yeah.
you know, I've been to, have you ever visited the little jail in Jim Thorpe?
No, I don't know who that is.
It's in Pennsylvania. It's an amazing place. There's a little jail there. It goes back to when they had a lot of the Irish. Why am I brain tooting here? What did they call them? Unions, and they were murdered on the front step. I think, if memory serves me correctly, with the story of this jail. Anyway, there was someone in one of the cells downstairs, and he had put his handprint, because he said he was an innocent man, put his handprint on the wall, and they've tried to paint over it several times. The thing keeps coming through. They finally sealed off the cell. The place is really haunted, and it's this tiny little town, and it's just, you know, been renamed, obviously, in modern times, Jim Thorpe. Beautiful little town and active little town. So, I mean, jails tend to be the place where you're left alone with your thoughts. You know, sometimes you're an innocent man. Here in Canada, we have the Ottawa jail,
Mhm.
which is, you know, I've been there, you know, a handful of times, which is crazy haunted. You know, I can't tell you how many jails that I've investigated. So, is it older jails? Is it modern jails? Is it?
I think that it's no coincidence that we do hear of so many haunted prisons and jails and so many haunted asylums and hospitals.
Yeah.
Because you're right, in both cases, or in all those cases, you have people that are confined to a relatively small area. You have a lot of intense emotion, and the majority of that emotion is not positive.
Correct.
And I have a lot of respect for prison officers, correction officers, but I don't think they like being at work, because they would, right? They do a critical job, but I can't imagine that their feelings are all sweetness and light every day, nor are those of most people that work in the hospital, right?
No, correct.
So there's a lot of stress, a lot of emotion, and I think it all manifests. So
it bleeds right out.
yeah.
Well, we'll have to, if you come over here, we'll have to bring Richard to the Warplane Museum, because I can guarantee you it's haunted, because I've been there several times, and the first time I found out by accident, because it was a school trip with my daughter, and it was just voices like crazy. There's Wes. Each cell has a different feeling.
Yeah.
Depends who was there, who was incarcerated there. Yeah.
Sleep well, Alex.
Sleep well.
Good night, Alex.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's the same feeling, you know, especially when you're getting back in the day. Some of the asylums, I mean, if your husband got tired of you, you know, put you in the asylum with the kids, you know, or if you were a criminal, you're getting put in with, you know, people like this, or, you know, people who are dubbed, you know, insane.
Yeah.
But then you have people who are, they're just, you know, they're criminals, and they're going in there and taking over, and they're abusive, and it's just, I've worked in this.
It was a convenient way. Speaking about mental institutions, it was a convenient way in the 19th century to get an easy divorce. And
Yeah.
if you wanted to get your wife committed, one of the things that amazed me was it required one signature of a judge if you wanted to get, say, your wife committed to an institution, and it took 3 to get her out.
Wow.
So
Wow.
you had to bribe one
That's true.
person, just one corrupt judge, and you could get someone put away, or one corrupt doctor. But to get them out was 3 times as difficult. So, I think a lot of those places have such sad and tragic histories, and that lingers. That energy goes somewhere. It lingers.
Then bring in the modern ghost hunters, who have to get into these places and stir things up.
Yeah.
Can we continue that just after my station ID? Sorry, guys. You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle Desrochers and myself, Amelia Pisano, and our amazing guest, and we're making him our friend and returning guest, Richard Estep, paranormal expert. I want to use that word today. If you're in New Orleans, you're listening to us on 107.7 FM or 105.3 FM. And that is United Public Radio. And this broadcast is partially sponsored by the good folks at Folgers Coffee Crystals. Thank you, Folgers.
You're drinking a Folgers, aren't you, Richard? Yes.
Were I not my tea was my name, but Folgers would be my coffee of choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good choice.
Good choice indeed. Yeah, I think, people who are, I guess, in the field or trying to get into the field, going into places like this, because, let's face it, chances are there is a lot of residual energy. There's probably definitely some spirits who are grounded and stuck because there were horrific times, and going in there trying to instigate a lot of activity. And I understand that, there's a right way, there's a wrong way. And I think some people leave their mark, and, I could see good spirits turning bad. That might be like a book, Good Spirits Gone Bad, just because they're being mistreated.
Yeah,
which is going up 27, 28.
as you said earlier, though, we are in death kind of as we are in life. Well, that's what I've heard from mediums that I respect. We don't suddenly gain universal knowledge and omnipotence and things of that nature, or I should say omniscience. We don't gain those things. So I think that a lot of what's blamed on demonic entities, there's that word again, is simply angry people, angry disembodied people. So it kind of makes a lot of sense to me that you could see those emotional changes and developments on the other side of the veil, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, if you're stuck, you're still going to be the same person. You're still the same individual. It's the essence. That's what makes up the individual. It's not the physical. So
wherever you go, there you are, right?
Exactly. And I just find that a lot of people getting into the field who maybe not experienced enough seem to think that these places are enticing and reenact what they see on television. And
television doesn't necessarily do good service in a lot of cases. I'm starting to develop a bunch of my own rules of the paranormal field. And I'm really interested in people's motivations for getting in, I genuinely started because I've always been fascinated with ghosts, especially the paranormal, and then wanted to help people that were experiencing these kind of things. What kind of puts my red flags up is when I see team names like, and I'm totally inventing this one, but Dark Unforgiven Spirits Paranormal, or
very foreboding.
It sounds like you just want to shine.
If your logo could be the cover of an indie horror movie, maybe think that. I personally, if I were calling for help, would not bring in a team whose logo was a grinning skull with blood dripping down it, So I think some people get into it because of the media aspect of it, and some people just want to be on TV, just want to get ratings, want to make money, want to do whatever. But there are still plenty of people that are getting into this because they're fascinated by it. And those are my kind of people. Those are the ones that I want to hang out with.
Yeah. Trying to get together with like-minded people, to share information. I think it's great that people bounce ideas around. This is the paranormal. There's nothing definitive here.
No.
I like how people are being creative with equipment development, different techniques of doing things.
Yeah.
I'm sort of old school. I like tape recorders. I like videotapes. I like things that can't be fudged, like
Hmm.
negatives and Polaroids and things like that. Pencil and paper, it's good.
Mhm.
But I love the new stuff too. I've had a lot of really good results with that. Um, what how do you tackle an investigation? What are your favorite things to use, and what do you get the best results with, aside from
Like,
common sense?
I've changed a lot in that I used to be very much a gadget guy.
Mm,
And I used to be very interested in trying to capture the holy grail piece of evidence, that photograph
sure.
of an apparition that you did.
Mm,
And what really changed my mind about that was Waverly Hills. I went to Waverly Hills, and if you rent Waverly Hills, it's extremely expensive, as I'm sure everybody knows. And you have 8 hours there. So the
mm,
clock is ticking. And it's a great location, but we paid like $1,000 5, 6 years ago to go to Waverly, and we spent 2 hours running camera cables and setting up audio. And I
mhm,
looked at my watch now. I realized that I'd blown 25% when I should have been experiencing this place. I should have been walking the halls and just trying to connect with the histories of the men, the women that had not only suffered with tuberculosis there, but the
mm,
caregivers. Because being a
Mhm.
paramedic myself, I empathize not just with those poor men and women that died there and were sick, but also the ones that had to care for them, and they were fighting a losing battle. They didn't have good tools to handle tuberculosis. They couldn't cure it.
mm,
So,
No.
and having just gone through the last year that we have as a paramedic in a pandemic, I
mm,
really feel, empathy for them more than I did even back then. And so I realized, you should get your head out of your phone, out of your camera. You should look around. You should walk the hallways. And my wife Laura had the great idea. She played some old time music, Eddie Cantor
Oh,
music,
yeah,
and
nice.
nice.
filled those hallways with the kind of music that would have been upbeat and prevalent back then, and then something
Mhm,
a
Yeah.
little bit mournful. And I
mhm,
just wandered the hallways in the dark, listening to this music and soaking it in. And I'll tell you that when I'm on my deathbed, hopefully many years from now, but if I'm thinking back over my life, I'm not going to remember photographs I took. I'm going to remember what it felt like to be kind of quietly dancing in the dark to old time radio in the
Yeah.
hallways of Waverly Hills. There's a
Right.
mhm,
connection there. And that is what made me want to become a storyteller.
mhm,
So this is a roundabout way of me saying that now I'm less about the kit than working with people I trust and respect. And you'll often see me in a corner of the room just watching and making notes and just trying to describe this experience for the people that are going to read my book.
mhm,
Feel
I
you for
see
those
myself
of
in
us
great
who
story.
can't be there. Waverly Hills is a big one for me. I have a big draw to it. I actually
Mhm.
have many prints on my wall in my office here of Waverly Hills, and the Booth brothers had done a documentary on it. I don't know if you saw it. It's worth the watch. They do go into that side of things. They go into the side of telling the story of the workers that lived there, and that had to use the death tunnel and had to care for them, and how they were put out on the balcony because they didn't know what to do with them. They thought that the sun in the middle of the winter would
Mhm.
heal them, and
Fresh air was
it's
the only cure. Yeah.
yeah. And if
Totally.
you watch their doc, you'll really love it because that's what they do. The whole thing is about question those who are still alive. I believe they even were able to interview a custodian from then, and a few people who were children then who stayed there and are
Mhm.
still alive. It's a beautiful take on.
Those are
That's
the
what I fall
stories I
for.
love.
Yeah,
I
me
love
too.
listening to
Yeah.
people who were in the moment, in the heyday, trying to get that perspective and
Hmm.
get their story, and then it gives you that opportunity to look at this now vacant place potentially through their eyes,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a great point. Yeah, those primary sources and those human beings, more to the point.
Yeah.
We had two things happen that were potentially paranormal, but what I remember most about my night at Waverley is how peaceful and tranquil it felt. The crickets, I've
Mhm.
heard some terrifying stories about that place. I have friends that went to Waverley like 2009, 2010, and they have stories of things crawling on the walls and shadow figures running in and out of hallways and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's cool, But to me, my experience of that place was I felt a kind of reverence. This was a house of healing. This was a place that wasn't meant to be scary, and I don't think should be scary. It's a place that was about trying to take care of and comfort people under the most difficult circumstances.
So, okay, with that being said, do you find, because I mean, everybody seems to want to investigate a place for the fear factor of it.
Yeah.
Do you find, because I find a lot of really good recordings and photos that I've captured have come from more benign locations, just interacting with spirits that really want to be heard or helped. How about for you? Do you find these really those hardcore places that are supposed to have all this malevolent activity delivered, or do you find it's just these more calm locations?
Well, the night after Waverley, we went to Bobby Mackey's in Raleigh, and
How was that?
quietest night of my life.
I hear that a lot, Richard. I do. I hear that a lot. I hear people saying, I don't know what anyone's talking about.
Yeah.
It was cool to be there. So it's one off the bucket list, but it was absolutely quiet. I think that you mentioned the fear factor, and the sad truth of it is fear sells.
It does.
And that's really unfortunate because I have a pretty decent library of paranormal books going back a century. And when you look at stuff that was published pre-1980s by the greats like Peter Underwood, the chroniclers of stuff like that, most of these are happy ghost stories. They're stories about places that are haunted by a sweet old couple that died in the house and they lived there together for 50 years and their apparitions are seen. They'll help tidy up sometimes, they'll move a teacup around or something like that. Like that was the majority of ghost stories, and then in private residences. And then, you get your historic tragic cases and stuff like that. But what you didn't have was this just monstrous aspect. And then came paranormal TV, and then came the D word, and then came just everything has to be dark and negative or we're not going to get ratings this week.
It's true, and I know because I've done it out of a multitude of questions I've given. But it could be this, yes. It could be this. Okay,
well, they ask you for 5 answers. You don't know which one they're going to use.
Answers, or you
don't know which one they're going to use.
Linda knows too, because we're all we end up having to do the same thing, and you just give, the questions that all that apply. But it is the fear factor that sells, and and that's okay if that's your thing. But again, you have to remember that there's a lot of logical reasons for things, but logic does not sell.
No, you're right, and nor does reason. I mean, it was kind of interesting. The first book I wrote, I hope the publisher won't mind me saying this, but first book I wrote was called In Search of the Paranormal. I'd originally titled it Fear in the Dark because I was like, that's a pretty, that implies like spooky and creepy and scary. And the publisher said, we're changing it to In Search of the Paranormal because there's not much fear in this book. And my favorite review said, I love how many ghosts there aren't in this book. Now, go forward 3 years, and I wanted to write a sequel to that book, which was the same type of book, 10 of my favorite cases. And I said, I wanted to call it These Haunted Hallways. I really like that title, and I'm still going to use it one day. These Haunted Hallways. And they wrote back and said, we like the book. We're changing the title to Trail of Terror. And I'm like, but there's no terror in the book. So even in that short space of time, the publisher had decided that they wanted a scary, scary title. And that's unfortunate because this field is so fascinating. And don't get me wrong, like I love a good scary movie, I think the Conjuring movies are great as long as you don't mistake them for fact or history.
Well, Andrea would tell you that as well.
Yeah, Andrea would, and so would anybody who knows anything about Enfield.
Yeah.
But they're great movies. I think the original Spielberg's Poltergeist is fantastic. I would say a good 80% of that is legit, the kind of phenomena that have been reported that aren't particularly scary. So I like a good scary movie, right? But the reality of what we do, it is so easy to scare yourself. It is so easy to psych yourself out. And that's when you're a visiting investigator. So you think of these poor people that are living in these places and the psychological toll that must take on them day after day, week after week. It just kind of breaks your heart. that no one should live in fear.
No, I agree. And it doesn't really take much. Sometimes it really is just something simple as educating people,
Mm-hmm.
and just changing the mindset. If someone feels victimized, you've got to step in there and turn that around to say, no, you're in control. You really are. And you'd be surprised how people turn around and all of a sudden everything just stops.
Mm-hmm.
It comes to reframing, I think, the way we look at things. Like a good example is the scratching phenomenon, right? We've all seen the terror that is evoked when somebody gets scratched. And of course, who gets blamed for it whenever somebody's scratched? It's a demonic entity, right? Say it with me. Well, I'll tell you something interesting. As a paramedic, I work with a lot of combative and intoxicated patients. And in order to keep myself safe and my partner safe, we have to get those patients onto our stretcher and have their arms and legs restrained so that they can't hurt themselves and can't hurt us. And every so often, not that infrequently actually, one of us will get scratched, right? Okay. So are we dealing with the paranormal equivalent of that? Are we dealing with not some kind of monster with claws, as I think certain shows would have you believe? Are we dealing with a combative, frightened, impaired spirit that is, doing what it knows how to do? Because if you look at it in that way, then everything changes. And another good example was that I'm fascinated with the UFO phenomenon, although I've only wrote one book on it. It fascinates me, and the whole alien abduction thing. And so, it's such a terrifying experience. You talk to somebody like Travis Walton, and he'll tell you how frightening it all is. But then I got to thinking, right? If do a thought experiment for a minute. If you were a person that didn't know anything about the way our modern civilization works, let's say we took you out of the rainforest and dropped you in the middle of Toronto, okay? And you get hit by a car and you're injured. What happens? Well, this machine with flashing lights and loud noises comes up, stops. Somebody like me gets out. I'm dressed in a weird suit with all this stuff about me, and
especially nowadays.
I'm loving Richard's perspectives on everything right now. Yeah.
And then I start doing painful things to you. I'm putting needles into your body. Why am I hurting you? What am I doing? I'm taking you up in the air. I'm taking you to an even stranger place with bright lights and all these noises and machines that go big. But I'm doing it in your best interest because that's what paramedics do.
Sure, but you're not creeping into somebody's bedroom at night while they're asleep and pulling them out.
That's that point. But what I'm trying to say is if you just look at the same phenomenon from a slightly different perspective.
Yes.
And I'll give you another one from John Tenney. I adore John Tenney. I think he's a great thinker. And John and I, one night, were talking about shadow figures. And how, again, we, the TV community, are somewhat to blame for this. The shadow figure is seen as a creepy, frightening, disturbing thing. He told me that when you get into some of the Eastern traditions, when you start to move towards Asia, then the shadow figure in those kind of cultures is actually seen as a blessed and a divine thing. That some of them believe that these are the returned spirits of our loved ones who are being backlit by the light of heaven. And that's why they're shadowy. All we can see is as if they were standing in front of this brilliant, blinding light. So they appear as a shadow. And he said, we're the ones that are scared of shadow figures here in the West. If you go further east, they find it comforting and they revere them, which just knocked me sideways. Also, I was very drunk at the time.
I think it depends, on culture, because I've talked to enough people who have had horrific experiences. And what's the last thing you thought when something happened to you? Shadow person.
Was that shadow person trying to warn you?
Well, there's a lot of different, perspectives when it comes to that. I mean, jeepers, it's again, it comes down to mindset, and it comes down to experiences. I mean, there have been shadows in here. Back in the day, not so much anymore. Even white shadows, oddly enough.
I think we all see the world with our own set of biases and beliefs, and that's entirely normal. What we do isn't a science as much as we would like it to be. It isn't yet. You really can't go get a PhD in this stuff anymore. So I think that what I believe versus what you believe is based on our own experiences.
Yeah.
And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Mhm.
That I have some things wrong, you have some things wrong, I have some things right, you have some things right. And the bigger picture kind of eludes us all. It does fascinate me, though, thinking that when we talk to our friends in the UFO and the cryptid communities, how we used to treat these as very separate, distinct fields, and they're all starting to look like legs of the same tripod to us now, don't you think?
That's true. No, you're correct. I think it's a really fine line. Sorry,
No,
Amelia.
no, don't
I just
ever
say finger up. It's like, okay,
apologize.
fingers up.
No, yeah, I mean, because there's a lag. We don't want to cut each other off.
Yeah.
Linda asked, how do you feel about John Sable's ghost excavation
Or
techniques?
John Sable. Yeah.
Sable, sorry. I'm pronouncing it as an Italian. I'm going with that.
Yeah.
So I'm not hugely familiar with John. I did sit in one of his lectures at DragonCon once, and I saw some of the stuff he was doing. I want to say at Gettysburg. So I found it intriguing. I'd like to honestly know more about it and read more about John's stuff, and I'm not conversant enough with it to have an opinion yet. I'll say I found it intriguing, though, from what I saw.
Right. Reenactment.
Yeah, reenactment is a stimulation, isn't it? You know, I mean, speaking about prisons, when we investigated the Cripple Creek prison in Colorado, an old Wild West era prison, Wes and two of his fellow prison officers from Canada came over and locked us in the cells and did the prison officer thing. Nice. And if you've never been on a cell block that's being locked down by Canadians at night, you haven't.
That gives a whole other meaning to a Canadian in a cage, Joe.
Well, the Canadians were all out of the cages. We were in the cages. Yet the Americans in cages.
Right.
There's probably an analogy there if I can't look for it. But you know, thinking about it, these are guys that are very comfortable on cell blocks because they run them. Yes. And I'm very not comfortable on cell blocks. But to be in the dark and to have them wandering around, you know, bellowing out as prison officers to get ready for lights out, you know, that kind of thing.
Right.
It sends a chill down your spine, and it gives you an appreciation for what it must have been like to have been a prisoner there. And, you know, even though I knew I could get out and this was my friend, for a moment it was that kind of game of involuntary make-believe, right, where you're like, this is kind of intimidating, actually. This is kind of creepy. And it got me wondering, will that stimulate the spirits? It was close to a reenactment.
Did you find, did you catch
we got what was a growl. We did record a growl in there, and it was loud enough and close enough. We actually wondered if like a mountain lion had gotten into the jail somehow.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Right. So how would you explain that then? Because you don't like the D word. So how would you explain a growl coming through?
I've been growled at by aggressive patients on many occasions.
Really?
Sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
I don't think I'd be growling. I'd be F-bombing.
and let me be clear, Michelle, as well, right? I'm not saying there aren't such things as non-human entities.
Sure.
I think that would be immensely arrogant. What I'm saying is that the word demon is used so much for any inexplicable or possibly aggressive interation. It's almost meaningless. It's almost watered down.
Yeah, negative or malevolent is a better word. You still have to go to Farside Lounge in Old Colorado. You have to do it. They've been on TV a lot. I think, I'm not sure, but I think Sean Crusher might have been at that location.
Oh, the Crush, the Colorado Crush?
Yeah, he may have been on that one because I was watching a show late at night because, of course, most of us are up all freaking night like I am. And I caught it and I was like, wow, like I had the girls on the show with Bobby that time. And then I had Sean and he had told me about your doppelganger that he had seen. Yes.
Sean went, so there's that old saying, right? You know, you look like you saw a ghost. Exactly fit Sean. And he's not easily rattled. But when he turned the corner and saw me in the cell with somebody standing on the door, I actually thought he might faint. He's like, how did you get in here? How did you get in here?
He's such a good man, too. He helped me on a case that was, well over 2 hours away from him. And he went to help her out. And I was just so impressed by him.
Yeah, he is. He's a lovely guy, Sean. And I absolutely believe he saw what he says he saw. It intrigued me that my doppelganger, or whatever you want to call it, had a different colored shirt on. That was the only difference. But yeah, I've enjoyed working with Sean in the past, and I do want to check out the Far Side Lounge. My docket is pretty full for this
Yeah,
year.
it's fascinating. If you go on YouTube, you see all kinds of stuff going on and them just reacting to it like, what the hell, you know?
Yeah, I have to check
But
it out.
they're pretty comfortable with it.
I like people that have come to terms with it. I mean, the Graves family at Fox Hollow are the same way. They've come to a detente with their spirits, and I think that's great that you don't feel the need you have to move them on or try and push them out like uninvited house guests.
No, I believe that the spirits that haunt the Far Side Lounge are just having a lot of fun.
Well, I mean,
They,
if you're going to be somewhere for all eternity, Amelia, do you pick a bar? Do you pick a prison?
oh, I damn
Sorry,
well pick
Wes.
a bar. Sorry, Wes. Sorry, Wes. Bar's
Yeah.
got gin.
Oh.
Sorry, but yeah.
No, I've got a rule in the house. You got to try to pop over at least once and you come back, you're not so angry. Then you can
Yeah.
hang out as much as you want. You know, this place now is pretty benevolent. You know, we've got the
Yeah.
lady of the house who the house is built for, and she's lovely.
She's
And
charming.
yeah, it's not as dramatic as it used to be with doors just swinging open in the middle of the day and footsteps, and you walk in the front door, it's hello. It's like, oh, geez, you know, would you call me? No, okay. It was pretty crazy at one time, but it can be a little bit unnerving. You know, it's like
Yeah.
one time, like Wayne's in the shower and somebody walks in and like opens like the shower curtain. It's like, hey, private time. Just close
Oh,
it
yeah.
and leave.
It's
I'm
like,
just like,
leave me alone.
As
you know, yeah.
much as I've done this, I still don't like sleeping at haunted locations, and I do it.
Oh, really?
But yeah,
Oh,
I don't like that idea of letting my guard down, and I think it is that
Yeah.
when I'm drifting off to sleep, I go back to being that 5-year-old boy that's scared of monsters under the bed, you know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you're tired enough, though, I slept at Velisca in the kids' room, and I remember
There you go.
Velisca,
Look at you.
wow.
I remember laying there. It's a noisy house, right? It's an old house that creaks. And I remember laying there in bed in the room where, and I'm thinking, 4 kids were murdered in this room.
Yeah.
It's such a tragedy.
Yeah.
And, you know, what must it have been like to hear the footfalls of the Axeman walking down that hallway towards this room? I don't think I could possibly sleep.
I'm gone.
You were tired.
And out.
You were tired enough. See, I would have cried myself to sleep just knowing that 4 children were murdered there.
It is an awful thing, and you have to remind yourself, because when you go in that house, it is like going back in time. There is no electric lighting, there is no running water or anything, and pictures of the family that was killed are all over the house. Framed pictures are on the walls, so it's a house you have to be extremely respectful in. But I've been there several times researching my book about it, and I wanted to at least sleep there once. I'd be very happy never to do it again.
Yeah. I specifically always look to stay at haunted places, no matter where I go in the world. You know, I love the experience. Maybe I'm just a weirdo. Yeah, just let your guard down, go to sleep, see what happens. I don't know. I'm okay with that sort of thing, and I'd like to experience it. But I could see how it could be unnerving. A little bit different, I think, in that sort of a situation, knowing that someone has been killed and you're pretty much laying your head down where they took their last breath. It's a little bit of a different situation. I mean, especially if you're empathic, how can you not pick up on something like that? You know, like I said, Amelia, she'd be in a fetal position in the corner.
Absolutely.
Just like,
I was at the boarding house too.
Yeah,
I made it through there, but when I saw what happened to her as a child, that broke me on the staircase. I had to sit down to breathe because just reliving it, it's tough. Yeah.
I seem to be the only person in this field that's not empathic, which is interesting because I empathize with human beings all the time, but I don't pick up on the sensations of a place. But that being said, I do like being in a location and being able to connect just with the history that took place there. I mean, last Saturday I was at Jesse James's house.
Oh, wow. How was that?
It was entirely by accident. I was investigating the Bailey Mansion in St. Joseph, Missouri, and found out that Jesse James had died or been murdered in a house just down the street. And I'm a huge Western history aficionado.
I like that, yeah.
I looked it up, and I'm like, hey, he was shot on April the 3rd, and it's April the 3rd. How can we not go?
That's very cool. That's very cool.
So we went in, and it's a museum now, of course, with a lot of framed memorabilia and newspaper clippings and things of that nature. A cast of his skull and his teeth, which is a little strange. But there's just part of me that really loves connecting with the history of those that went before us by being in that space and, sitting in chairs that they sat in. And I love that. I think it's wonderful. So it's the best thing I have to being an empath.
No, I think it's great. I love history for that reason, especially when it has nothing to do with the paranormal. You just start venturing out. I love Europe for that because it's just so old. It doesn't matter where you go. I think sometimes you could just put your hands on the building, and just feel like it just resonates, especially when you go into Scotland and you're looking, especially when back in the day they would take bones and crush it in and put it into the, mix it in with the stone and the mortar. In Edinburgh, and I'd be just like, God, it's just bizarre. It really is. You just can't help but feel the energy of the people who walked there before you. You weren't allowed to have children. You weren't allowed, there's just stages that they went through where you were just not allowed
Oh my God, you're making me cry.
I'm sorry. Don't do that. No, but I absorb history. I love, especially ancient history. I love it. I've always excelled in it.
Rome is probably my ultimate bucket list trip.
Rome?
To go see ancient Rome.
You need a translator. I'm right here.
Sure.
Right here. We need a translator. But we have to hit Pisa because my family built it. So we have to go by there.
They weren't that good construction work as well, obviously.
You're hilarious. I've never heard that before. But
just teasing you.
I know. Everybody says that to me. Everybody says that to me. Yeah. It's a marsh. It's not on a bloody marsh.
Seriously though, I've always wanted to go to the Colosseum. What kind of EVPs would you get?
You're not allowed in there anymore though, Richard.
You're
not allowed in there anymore. There was vandalism going on during the tour. So they don't allow you, but I would imagine that you'd be able to get an EVP from just outside the wall. I would imagine you'd be able to get many EVPs, from there. You can do Rome in 3 days. Is not a lie. There's not that much there, really, but there's lots of pizza.
Well, I'm all for that. Thank you, Zach, for the kind words. I appreciate you letting us know.
He's our top fan. He's our top fan. He's our guy.
Well, I like his style.
Yeah, he's the best. He doesn't miss the show. He's here 2 nights a week. He doesn't miss a show.
Thanks.
Be grateful you don't have that empathy, that kind of strength, because you can see things in a different, perspective, because sometimes the empathy clouds your judgment and clouds things.
Well, it would probably be a hindrance in my line of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would, for sure. Do you think maybe your line of work, maybe you do have a degree, you are a little bit of an empath? I think everybody is to a degree, but in your line of work, do you think it's something that maybe you've shut off because it's self-preservation in many ways?
I don't know about that. I'm naturally compassionate for people, and most people in medicine are, especially pre-hospital medicine, because nobody gets into paramedicine for the money.
Right.
The hours are terrible. You work over the holidays, but it's a very fulfilling thing to be able to help people in that way. So
and
I'll do it as long as my body lets me do it.
You're in the front line, so thank you.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
As we near the end of the show, tell everybody how to find you. Tell everybody what you've got coming up.
Yeah, you can find me at richardestep.net, or you can find me on Facebook as Richard Estep Author. Coming up, I just finished recording for the TV show Destination Fear.
Nice. Very nice. It's a great show.
Coming up later. Haunted Hospital Season 3 is in the can, and I'm hoping, I should say it's completed, it's not in the toilet. And I'm hoping that will come to American screens soon. So I know you guys in Canada are getting that right now. My next ghost adventure, I'll be investigating the Sally House, not too far from now. And with my friends on Paranormal Encounters, Connor and India, we're going to be recording at one of my favorite locations in Iowa coming up. So
very cool.
Lots of hauntings in Iowa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Iowa's a great state for the paranormal.
Yeah.
I had no idea until I started digging into it.
A lot of old homes, and that's where the Mormons would stop and take respite before continuing on to Utah. There is a lot of history there.
I've written 3 books about Iowa locations already, with more coming. But I've
Very
always
cool.
wanted to work with Connor and India from Paranormal Encounters. They are great at what they do. They have this YouTube show. If you haven't seen it, check it out.
No, she's been on. I have to check her
Yeah,
out. She
give
was in
her a
chat.
plug.
Check out their show.
Give her a plug. Yeah.
Definitely. And I've wanted to work with those guys forever. And India's a fellow Brit, so we have the Brit Union.
Nice.
I love her name.
The British
Very
invasion.
British. Yeah.
So
It's a really polite invasion with tea.
it is. You have to have the
Would
tea.
you mind?
Yorkshire Gold.
Can we sit down? We're looking for your ghosts. Yeah, exactly.
Yorkshire Gold. Yes.
Well, thank you for joining us. It's always such a delight. You'll have to let us know when the next book is released, and maybe we can do this again, maybe during Spooky Month in October.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
inviting me on. Take care of yourself. And a big thank you to everyone that tuned in to join us tonight.
Thank you. I
Thank
like
you.
that. I almost don't have to freaking close
I
out.
love
the
it.
show.
He's
It's
like
great.
our third host. This is
I know,
amazing.
this is awesome, which I do have to sign us off. So thank you, guys. We've all come to the end of another fantastic segment. Thank you all for tuning in. Special guest Richard Estep. Always a pleasure and a privilege. Huge thank you to Folgers Coffee for partially sponsoring tonight's show. Please remember to stop by United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio, and stop by the YouTube channel, subscribe, and pop on over and find the Outer Realm on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to see a specific guest or topic on the show, please email us at theouterrealmcontact@gmail.com. Tune in next week as we welcome 2 more amazing guests. Wednesday brings Terry Lovelace to the Outer Realm, and he will be talking about UFOs and his abduction experiences. Thursday, of course, we bring back Darcy Weir and Stephen Bassett to the show discussing UFOs. Until then, Amelia and I bid you good night. Make sure you have a fantastic, safe weekend. You all behave and stay indoors. Here in Ontario, we're locked down.
We're locked down. Yeah.
We're behaving. So good night.
Good night.
Good night.